Have you ever caught yourself imagining the new you? The version that wakes up early, eats clean, reads every night, and finally feels in control? You picture it so vividly, that calm, steady self, that for a few seconds it almost feels real. And then nothing changes. That's the strange thing about the human mind. We can imagine transformation so intensely that it feels like progress, but it's not. It's a fantasy trap, a cycle where imagining growth replaces the act of growing. I've been there too. As a psychologist, I see it in clients all the time, and I've caught it in myself more times than I'd like to admit. The fantasy of change gives you a hit of relief, a small dose of hope dopamine. But it's fake fuel. It burns fast, and then you're left exactly where you started, only more frustrated. Let's explore why we fall into that trap, and more importantly, how to step out of it. Because once you see how the fantasy works, you can begin to replace illusion with movement, and that's where real change begins. When people talk about procrastination or lack of motivation, they often think it's a matter of willpower. But the truth runs deeper. The fantasy trap is not about laziness, it's about emotional safety. Imagining change gives you the illusion of control without the risk of failure. You can dream of quitting your job, starting your creative project, or having that difficult conversation. And in the fantasy, you always handle it perfectly. You never feel awkward, anxious, or rejected. Reality, on the other hand, is messy. The moment you actually try, the body tenses, the nervous system fires, and the part of you that remembers every past disappointment whispers, "What if you fail again?" So the mind retreats, not because you don't care, but because you're trying to protect yourself from pain. Fantasy becomes a defense mechanism. It's safer to imagine success than to risk feeling small again. That's why, after a day of planning, journaling, or watching self-improvement videos, you might feel good, but also strangely tired. You've spent energy rehearsing life, not living it. Here's something I often tell my clients. The fantasy version of you doesn't exist to inspire you. It exists to protect you. It's like a comforting story your mind tells to keep you from stepping into uncertainty. But every story has a cost. The more you invest in the fantasy, the less emotional energy remains for real movement. If this is starting to resonate, pause for a second. Think of an area in your life where you've been planning to change for months or even years. What if the reason you're stuck isn't because you're weak, but because your brain is trying to keep you safe? That's a small but radical shift in perspective. You don't have to hate yourself for not acting. You just have to understand what your mind is doing and learn to work with it, not against it. If this hits home, take a second to comment below. What's one fantasy loop you've noticed in your own mind? Writing it out is how awareness begins. Avoiding reality sounds harmless until you realize how much life it drains from you. Every time you choose the fantasy version of change, you send your nervous system a subtle message: I can't handle reality. And your brain listens. It starts to believe that discomfort is dangerous, that trying and failing means you'll fall apart, that you must stay inside the safety of imagination. But the irony is that it's the avoidance itself that hurts most. Because deep down, you know you're capable of more. And that quiet awareness becomes shame. Not the loud kind that screams, but the dull ache that whispers, why can't I just do it already? This is where many people start spiraling. They double down on fantasy, more vision boards, more manifesting, more dopamine loops. They tell themselves, I just need to visualize harder. But the truth is, they're using fantasy to numb the pain of not acting. The human mind can't tell the difference between safety and stagnation unless you train it. And training begins by doing something radically simple, facing small pieces of reality every day until it stops feeling fatal. Because the goal isn't to crush fear, it's to teach your body that fear is survivable. Think about this. Your body learns through exposure, not imagination. A person afraid of water doesn't learn to swim by picturing themselves floating. They learn by touching the water, breathing through the panic, and realizing, I didn't drown. That's how emotional learning works too. You can read, plan, imagine, affirm, but until you feel the discomfort and stay with it, the brain can't update the pattern. And that's why so many people stay trapped in loops of self-help without self-change. They're feeding the fantasy brain, not the learning brain. Now, let's ground this in something solid, the neuroscience behind it. When you imagine a future self, your brain releases small doses of dopamine, the same neurochemical that drives desire and motivation. It's a preview of reward. That's why daydreaming about success feels good. It's chemically satisfying. But here's the problem. Dopamine isn't just a motivation chemical. It's a prediction chemical. Your brain uses it to predict pleasure from possible actions. If you repeatedly imagine success without acting, your brain eventually learns that fantasy itself is the reward. That's the moment real motivation dies. You've trained your brain to prefer the simulation of success over the messy path toward it. So when you later try to take action, it feels uncomfortable, not because action is wrong, but because your reward system has been rewired. The fantasy gives you instant pleasure. Reality gives you delayed satisfaction. And your brain always picks the faster one until you consciously retrain it. Retraining doesn't mean forcing yourself through pain. It means reconnecting effort with meaning. When you take even a small step, cleaning one corner, sending one email, starting one uncomfortable talk, pause and let yourself feel the shift. Notice the difference between imagined relief and real progress. That's how you rebuild your dopamine system, by teaching it that action, not fantasy, equals fulfillment. If you're finding this useful so far, give this video a like. It helps more people find it, and it reminds your brain that you're part of a community learning to grow consciously. Let's go deeper. Growth isn't just a mental exercise, it's physical. The body carries memory, tension, resistance. When you imagine doing something brave, your muscles don't contract. When you actually do it, they do. That tension is data. It's your nervous system saying, this feels unsafe, but maybe we can survive it. Each time you stay present in that moment, breathe, ground, move, you're sending your body a new message. Reality isn't as dangerous as I thought. That's where transformation happens, not in your thoughts, but in your tolerance. Growth is nervous system training disguised as emotional healing. Here's the hard part most people skip. To leave the fantasy, you have to face what the fantasy was protecting you from. For some, it's the fear of failure. For others, it's the grief of realizing how much time has passed. For many, it's shame. that quiet sense that I should have been further by now. Facing those feelings doesn't sound exciting, but it's where emotional adulthood begins. Change doesn't start with doing, it starts with feeling. Feeling the disappointment, the fear, the guilt, and realizing that none of it kills you. That's emotional truth. I can hold this pain and still move forward. When you can sit with that truth, you stop needing the fantasy to rescue you. Because fantasies are anesthesia. They numb what's raw. But truth is medicine. It hurts, then it heals. This is where courage becomes practical. Not the Hollywood kind, but the quiet courage of staying present. You might feel your chest tighten when you write that email, your stomach twist when you set a boundary, or your throat close when you say no. Stay there. Take a breath. Don't run back into imagination, because that's the moment your nervous system is learning a new rule. I can survive truth. And once you know that, no fantasy can control you anymore. Now let's talk about reclaiming power, the real antidote to the fantasy trap. It begins not with grand vision, but with micro movement. Your brain doesn't need huge proof, it just needs consistency. If you've spent years imagining change, don't try to overhaul your life overnight. You'll only trigger the same defense mechanisms that kept you frozen. Start small, but make it real. Do something that leaves evidence in the physical world. If you want to get fit, don't design a workout plan. Take a 5-minute walk and write down how it felt. If you want to heal emotionally, don't read another book. Sit for 2 minutes with the feeling you usually escape. If you want to build confidence, speak one uncomfortable truth out loud today. These aren't symbolic acts. They're reprogramming signals. Each small movement tells your brain, this time we act. Over time, these micro-movements accumulate into a quiet, unstoppable momentum. And when your brain sees evidence, dopamine follows naturally, not as fantasy, but as feedback. This is how we shift from dreaming of change to embodying change, not in one leap, but in a series of gentle but real steps. There's one more thing, and it might surprise you. When you stop living in fantasy, life feels emptier at first. You lose the constant buzz of imagining a perfect future. The silence can feel strange, almost depressing. But that emptiness is space. It's where reality begins to grow. Because the mind that once escaped into imagination now has energy available for experience. You start noticing texture, breath, color, small details of life you used to overlook. The fantasy collapses, and what's left is presence. Presence isn't glamorous, but it's the soil of real transformation. That's where relationships deepen, work becomes meaningful, and self-respect quietly replaces self-judgment. So here's the truth. You don't need to destroy your fantasies. You just need to stop worshiping them. You can thank them for protecting you when you weren't ready for truth. Then gently say, I'm ready now. Real change isn't cinematic, it's subtle. It's the moment you choose to breathe instead of escape, act instead of imagine, feel instead of avoid. That's the real revolution, when your life stops being a daydream and starts being your own. If this video helped you see your patterns a little more clearly, share it with someone who might be stuck in their own loop. And subscribe, because every week we dive deeper into the psychology of real growth, one honest conversation at a time. Take a moment right now, pause, breathe, and ask yourself quietly, what's one small, real action I can take today? Then do it. That's how you walk out of the fantasy, one real step at a time.